Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm a PhD candidate at Monash, and my two supervisors who are part of this project are Stephen McKenzie and Matt Mundy. So today I'll be talking about my projects, two projects actually, that look at mindfulness in student wellbeing at university. Okay, so to start off, I'll just give a really quick and brief rationale and background on my project. As I'm looking at student wellbeing and mindfulness, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. So student wellbeing in Australia, almost half of university students might report distress, and almost 1 in 4 students experience severe psychological distress. So this has been associated with lower or decreased academic performance, lower academic self-efficacy, decreased motivation, less ambitious academic plans, low engagement, and also more likelihood of dropout. So mindfulness is a type of training and practice that typically involves focusing on breathing, being aware and attentive of your surroundings. And it's also about developing acceptance of your immediate sensations. So mindfulness has been associated with decreased stress, depressive symptoms and anxiety in students, as well as increased wellbeing, life satisfaction, relationships and other health-related behaviours. So that's why we've chosen mindfulness to look at for a wellbeing resource for students at university. Now I'm going to go into two projects in this presentation. The first project was the pilot, and this project aimed to evaluate a pilot of brief online mindfulness activities for student stress, wellbeing and mindful attention. And the reason why we looked at an online intervention was because of prior to COVID-19, there was a global increase in online learning. In addition to that, online students sometimes have less or limited access to wellbeing resources, unlike their on-campus counterparts. So that's why for the rest of the two projects that I'm talking about, we do focus on an online intervention and also on incorporating online students as participants. So the setting of which this first project was evaluated in were for on-campus and online students that were at Monash and as well as at King's College London. And this data was collected in semester 1 in 2019 before COVID. The study design for this project was a quasi-experimental pre- and post-test design. So the waitlist control group received intervention materials after the study had finished. The intervention group received 2-minute guided mindfulness sessions, and there were 6 of those sessions in total. They were pre-recorded and they could be downloaded from the LMS site. These 6 sessions were released in increments across the intervention period, but once they were released, they could be accessed at any time and anywhere because they were all online. The intervention duration was 1 semester or 1 teaching period in length. So 1 semester for the on-campus students, which is 12 weeks, and 1 teaching period, which is 6 weeks for the online students. The survey took about 15 minutes to complete, and they were completed at time 1 and time 2, so at the start and end of semester. The 3 validated measures that were included was the Warwick Environmental Wellbeing Scale, the Perceived Stress Scale, and the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale. I'll briefly go over some sample participant numbers now. So in total, we had 427 participants at the start of the study, and of those, 283 were from Monash and 144 were from King's in London. At the end of our study period, at the follow-up, we had an overall retention rate of 36%. The retention rate at Monash was 46% and much higher in comparison to the very low retention rate at King's, which was just 15%. I'll briefly go over the demographics of this sample. So majority of the sample were between 18 and 25 years old, female, enrolled in an online mode, undergraduates, and as you can see, 96% of the sample were psychology students. We had 1 self-report engagement item, and of these students that responded to this item, 4 out of 6 sessions were completed on average. Half of them completed all 6 of them, and 7 said they didn't complete any sessions. Now we used change, which was the time 2 score minus time 1 score. So for example, a student's wellbeing measure at time 2 minus the student's wellbeing measure at time 1. and that was used as our dependent variable. The intervention condition, so the mindfulness condition, significantly predicted between 8 and 12% of change for all three measures, controlling for baseline, age, and study mode. So what this means is that the mindfulness intervention predicted between 8 and 12% of change across the semester. And for all of these measures, they were an improvement. So an improvement in wellbeing, an improvement in stress, and an improvement in mindfulness. Because of these positive results, we then went on to our second project. Our second project was looking at the ecological validity of our mindfulness program. So what we mean by this is we wanted to understand what the natural uptake was of a mindfulness program like this within an educational context. And we also wanted to understand how students naturally engage with a mindfulness program without added reminders from a research study point of view. We also wanted to improve the students' experience with the mindfulness program. So instead of incorporating it directly in Moodle, we actually used a website called Rise 360 to present the materials in a more modern and easy to navigate interface. And that was still accessed though via the LMS, so via Moodle. This program was accessed via the university-wide online orientation site at Monash. This was called Monash Essentials. The data was collected last year in semester 2, so during COVID. The intervention had two variations, a daily version and a weekly version. The daily version had 5 sessions per week, and the weekly version had 1 session per week. Now, these were just suggestors. They didn't actually have to complete all those sessions, but it was a guide provided to the students. There were in total 5 pre-recorded sessions, and each of those sessions were between 10 to 15 minutes in length. The sessions were presented by a male mindfulness researcher and a female psychologist. Both of these variations were a little bit different. So they did have a similar focus. So both of them, for example, did a body scan, but they were presented slightly differently, and that each of the researchers or psychologists had their own take on things as well. The intervention duration was 1 semester in length, so 12 weeks plus a 2-week mid-semester break. The study design was experimental, again, also pre and post-test design, but just a single group, so we didn't include control participants. The survey this time was a little bit longer, and this was because we wanted to incorporate some other relevant things such as the online study confidence of students given COVID, as well as the impact that they believed that COVID-19 had on them as well. So we had the same 2 wellbeing and perceived stress measures, but this time the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire we included. We also asked students about the motivations and barriers towards completing mindfulness, as we thought this would help us understand the engagement and help us improve in the future as well. We also asked about the evaluation of the intervention as well. Not only did we incorporate survey data, but we also wanted to incorporate this time LMS analytics. So the engagement data was measured by the number of logins, the number of times students logged in, the pattern of the logins, and the nature of the logins across the semester. And this was really a limitation that we tried to improve on from the previous study, which was the self-report measure. The demographics of this demographics of this sample for project 2, the mean age of participants were 24.5 years old. Majority of them were female again. 85% of them were enrolled on campus normally, so that means that they normally were enrolled on campus, and 15% of them enrolled online. But because of COVID, all of these students were actually studying online, and half of them were undergraduate students. Because we invited students via that university-wide orientation site, we had a really wide proportion and representation of the participants across this university. So that was really great to see. And this time we had 24% of the sample from medicine, nursing and health sciences, 20% from business and economics, and 14% from education, just to name a few of those. In total, we had 833 participants that completed the baseline response and 236 completed the follow-up survey. So overall, we had a 28% retention rate. In terms of engagement via LMS analytics, 47% of the sample accessed the program. Of those people that accessed the program, 60% accessed 1 week in the semester, 18% accessed 2 weeks across the semester, and 22% accessed 3 or more weeks in the semester. And of those people, most of them accessed between 3 and 5 weeks. We are now in the stages of analysis. So for our engagement variable, we are going to classify our engagement or our users as no use, so no engagement, medium, and high engagement. So no engagement will include the students that didn't access any weeks, so 0 weeks. We then wanted to take a percentage of the top and classify them as our most engaged. So we chose top 25%, which were people that accessed 3 or more weeks. The remaining 75% accessed 1 to 2 weeks. Now, just some descriptives and preliminary findings. So in terms of barriers and motives, we found that majority of the barriers and the motives that we provided were quite important to students and would help them. And if these things were implemented or available, it would help them improve and practice mindfulness more. So this is listed in order of highest to lowest. So we can see that if students feel that if they can see they're benefiting from mindfulness, they would practice more mindfulness. If they could help or they could remember to create a routine, this would be quite important for them practicing, as well as if they could find more time in their schedule. So a perception of time, being able to create a routine and seeing that it's actually helping them would help students practice more. Some of the other items that were also important to students were accessing the activities on other devices, such as a phone or a tablet. And then the final 2 motives that might help students as well, but lower than the other variables here, were a social aspect. So if their friends and family were also interested in mindfulness, as well as if they were receiving reminders about the mindfulness program. In terms of outcome measures at follow-up, like I said, we are in the middle of conducting analyses, and we are going to look at how wellbeing, stress, and mindfulness changed across the semester between participants that accessed 0 sessions and between participants that were highly or somewhat engaged, so accessed 3 or more sessions. But just to provide some descriptives here, in terms of wellbeing and the change in wellbeing across the semester, the mean change was 2.60 and 8 standard deviations. So this is an increase in wellbeing across the semester. So students' wellbeing actually improved at the end of semester compared to at the start of semester. Perceived stress went down, so minus 1.5. So this means that their stress improved. So there was decreased stress across the semester. And similarly, mindfulness improved by 2.76. Again, this is an increase in mindful attention awareness. Just some brief descriptives again of the intervention evaluation that we found. So we found that 17% preferred to listen to the male voice of the intervention, 44% preferred to listen to the female voice, and 39% didn't have a preference. Students also said that in comparison to normal circumstances, 51% of them agreed they'll be more likely to engage in and practice mindfulness. We also found that 44% of participants intend on accessing the mindfulness program again, 47% said they might, so maybe, and 9% said they wouldn't. Although we are still in the stages of analysing our second study, we can see that overall students do enjoy and like having access to a wellbeing resource such as this mindfulness program. In terms of the barriers and motivations, I think that it'd be really valuable for us to understand how we can help students address those perceived barriers to managing their wellbeing. But on the other hand, how do we utilise and maximise the things that students feel motivate them as well? How do we incorporate those in the mindfulness programs or programs such as these. The other 2 points that have come out of my research that I found really interesting is that gaining initial interest, so even clicking to do a study like this or even clicking on the mindfulness program, as well as maintaining engagement across the program, within the program, is a difficult challenge that we have at a university. Students are often busy. That's the first thing they say. They're busy, they have little time, and when they get more stressed, they often say that they have less time. But we know that this is when things like this or wellbeing related resources are important to engage in. And in terms of engagement, I've also noticed that it could potentially be even more difficult to engage students that might not be inherently easy to engage. And what I mean by that is that we can see that from our first study, we had a lot of psychology students and a higher retention rate. In our second study, we had a more diverse population and a lower retention rate. So it's possible that students who might naturally be interested or engaged in these types of self-managed well-being or stress-related measures, resources, might be more interested in this. But we know that all students would benefit from incorporating this into their student life. Thank you, everyone.